Hello, everyone. I'm Kathleen McLean, Assistant Curator of Talks and Screenings at the AGO in Toronto. Thank you for joining us for today's talk with Jennifer Rose Sciarrino and Adelina Vlas. Jennifer and Adelina, welcome. Thank you for doing this. We begin always by acknowledging that Toronto and the land the AGO is on is Mississauga Anishinaabe territory, Mississauga. It's also governed by a treaty between the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Canadian government. The land has also been occupied by other Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat confederacies. So a couple of things before I introduce Jennifer and Adelina. After the conversation, if time permits, Jennifer will answer some of your questions, which you can ask using the Q&A feature towards the bottom of the screen. And also a thank you to the TD Ready Commitment, our lead sponsor of talks and performances, for generously supporting this talk. Jennifer Rose Sciarrino attained her BFA in 2006 at the School of Visual Arts at Ryerson. Recent solo and two-person exhibitions include For Swan at Daniel Faria Gallery in Toronto, From Root to Lip at Toronto's Mercer Union, But Both Are Sensitive at Project Panjay in Montreal, and Ruffled Follicles and a Tangled Tongue at the Southern Alberta Art Gallery in Lethbridge. And it was really fun to read all of those because the titles are very poetic and beautiful. Her work has been included in exhibitions at Art Museum Toronto, Blackwood Gallery at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, the Jackman Humanities Institute in Toronto, Oakville Galleries, Bâtiment d'Art Contemporain in Geneva, the Dunlop Art Gallery in Regina, and the Power Plant in Toronto, among others. And her work was also included in the 2020 edition of Free Sculpture at the Rockefeller Center, curated by Brett Littman, and will also be included in a forthcoming exhibition at MoCA in the fall of this year. And Adelina Vlas is the Associate Curator of Contemporary Art here at the AGO, where since 2014, she's organized a bunch of exhibitions, including but not limited to Ragnar Kjartansen's Death is Elsewhere, Hegu Yang's Emergence, and Hito Starl, This is the Future. So please, Jennifer and Adelina, take it away.
Thank you, Kathleen, for the introduction. And thank you, Jennifer, for being here with us this afternoon. And hello, everyone out there in the virtual realm. It's good to have you with us. And I hope you will join the conversation through the Q&A function and of the Zoom webinar. And so I like to start my conversations with artist Jennifer by asking how this last year has been for you. I think we've all learned to function a different way, and here we are in the virtual realm having this conversation, but we're in our second pandemic year, and things have changed beyond our imagination. So what has it been like for you, who likes to speculate about futures in your practice?
I mean, I think it's been I don't know, speculating about what this last year has will feel like, or what will come of this, is kind of difficult when you're kind of really living a scenario. My year hasn't been the way that I tend to work is very alone feeling anyway. I don't mean that to sound sad. It's just it's often like a practice, an art practice. You're kind of by yourself in your studio working. So my scenario hasn't really changed very much. My studio did move. My apartment did move. I did make a solo show in the time period of the pandemic, which was different and a little bit difficult, but it was okay. So my year has been, I've been reading a lot. Mm-hmm. I know that's it's harder to concentrate reading for sure. I find I'm distracted more than I've ever been before, but I'm okay. I'm just kind of keeping my nose in books and, trying to be supportive for friends and family.
I'm going to share the presentation we've put together to guide us through our conversation this afternoon. And you mentioned the show you just did last year, and I have here kind of an overall view of the presentation at the Daniel Faria Gallery for Swan. And You mentioned reading, and I think that when I saw this show, first of all, I was immediately seduced by the sensual quality of the work and its beauty, really. And then, of course, I dived deeper into the work and how it came together, and I was fascinated with this question of how does it all come together? What happens first? Um, how does the inspiration, the materials, the idea for the presentation, how do they all come together?
Mhm. So I knew that for this exhibition, I wanted to, the show I had done previously at Mercer Union, I created what felt like a very like an ecosystem, and I really liked that quality of that kind of exhibition. And I wanted to do that again for this show. And so there's a few things that happened sort of simultaneously. I was working on these pieces, which are the sculptural pieces in the center, the stone carving. I was working on these concepts of combining, not true to scale or necessarily form, but combining different kinds of microscopic or smaller or sometimes larger than life parts of nature, like parts of the living ecosystem, and then combining them to kind of like create smaller stories within each piece. And as I was working on that and designing them and, playing with stone and experimenting with it, I was reading a book called 2312 by Kim Stanley Robinson, who's really excellent at world building and who had a character that ended up playing into the title of the book. And then also the pandemic was going on, and we were kind of like, it was the very beginning in the spring, and everybody was very much divided, and the idea of hugging and touching was the first thing that I think a lot of people really felt, other than, I guess, fear. So I wanted that to play into, I wanted to make this sort of feeling of the opposite of a screen show. So there's like very sensual, very material based. It feels like if you take a look at the glass work, or if you take a look at some of the stonework, there's lots of details. There's fingerprints in the glass work. It's just a very tangible, physical show. So those three things were happening at once. So the first pieces were the sculptures. Do you want me to explain those a little bit?
Yes, I think that as we kind of zoom in the presentation, it would be nice if you can talk about them, because they were presented on those plinths and also on those bricks. So if you can also tell us about how you made that decision to present them in this particular way. And also how they were grouped, because this idea of how they sit together and talk to each other is also part of the experience.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll explain the plinths quickly. They are comprised of kiln bricks that I actually borrowed from Maker Sculpture, who were the fabricators of the glass work. And I liked the way, and the glass work was actually like the way that it was, because this cast glass was actually went into a kiln to be made. I was really interested in trying to not build anything new for this exhibition. I find that kind of tricky when it comes to working with sculpture. Like, you often have to have some kind of a support, or nothing, like it is possible to just have them standing there, but these needed something to hold them up from the floor. And I wanted to try and reuse something. And I hadn't really done that a lot. And I wanted to give it a try. It was very difficult. It's very difficult to find the found material that I think that works well with the sculptures themselves. And I toyed around with a lot of ideas, and I really liked how these kind of like brought each other into the fold naturally. And then also just the like brickness with the stone, and they have like the patinaing on them from the years of being used. And then, that life feeling is also in that richness, is also kind of like in the stone over the millennia that it's taken to make their beauty. So I thought that they would play nicely with each other. And then I really wanted to have them kind of like all like in a way where they can communicate with each other. Like, they're all kind of like doing their own thing in their own little world, but they're, you don't really know the possibility of like one like slithering over to another one, or one like rolling over to, like they could combine. So an example of what the sculptures are kind of doing, so this is called Butterfly Buffet. And these are seeds. So the plate looking thing is a seed, as well as like the little pieces, and they're all of species that butterflies particularly are drawn to. So sort of like this idea of like, what would an ecosystem need to do maybe, or okay, so this is another kind of thing that's interesting about these questions, is that did the pieces choose to do this? Did the forms that they're supposed to look like, did they choose to become together? Or was this forced on them by an external hand, like potentially like a human hand? So it's like, yeah, like butterflies needed, these certain plants to survive. Maybe they would come together to make a different species that could weather whatever scenario it is that they needed to be able to survive. So that's the idea behind this work. And so this is it's all alabaster, carved alabaster, but then different kinds. So you could get a sense of like things coming together.
And you've worked with this material before, but
Once,
here I feel like you're taking it kind of to the next level in a way. And where do you source this material, and how do you select exactly kind of the grain in this, or is it accidental? How much of it is you really looking for a particular look and feel in the stone?
It's the latter. So I will look for, to save yourself some time too, I will look for the shape of what, like something the most similar in the bunch of whatever color it is that I wanted. So I knew that I wanted this piece to have the brown that was more based off of the seed that it was based off of. So sometimes I'll choose colors that way from like what I've seen in the reference material, because I'm referencing a lot of like microscopic material that I'm getting off of the internet. So sometimes they are artificially colored, which happens a lot, or it is the color of the thing itself. So I'll choose very specific ones in this context of like what it is that I would like them to do. The seeds were great because they came from a lot of offcuts, like the smaller seeds that are collected on the plate and are kind of overflowing. So that was a choice of like just like wanting to have like a bunch of like something to show them as being different. But often I will go and look for the kind of alabaster that like I need this one to look like a tongue, and I need it to be approximately this size, so that you could get as little waste as possible. Although like I keep everything, like even the dust, just in case. So yeah, like this one, so this is a frog embryo. It's called the splits. And so this is a frog embryo as it's splitting and becoming two, like on its way to becoming four. The slithering shape is, the tongue-like shape is an anther of a dandelion. No, anther of a daisy, I'm sorry. And so it's like kind of like this like plant amphibian kind of like coming together, a cell and a plant. Maybe they might need each other. Maybe they just choose to be together. They're in their own kind of like, one's like kind of looks like it's about to like meld with the other one. Mm-hmm. And so this is actually like the piece, the anther piece was like made specifically to be able to slot in exactly so that it doesn't have hardware. So these ones are like very slowly carved for that one to fit into the other. So there is like a natural coming together of them as well, like with the process of me making them. They have to be like custom fit for each other.
Right, and it's very, I think that was one of the really intriguing part of the experience, was really understanding how everything fits together. And also because the AGO, I will like to remind our viewers, purchased those works, actually, this series of sculptures, the alabasters, in this exhibition at Art Toronto last year. So now Jennifer is represented in the collection, which we're very happy with. And I very much look forward to installing those works at the AGO, because they will not be presented in this way. I mean, this was a unique presentation on those plinths with the bricks as you see them in this image. So the idea of symbiosis and symbiotic relationships is really important to you, and it's a thread through the last series of exhibitions and what we'll be discussing here today. And they really, like, if you think about a symbiotic relationship, it really challenges our understanding of individuality, or at least how we think of individuality culturally and societally and so on. And I think that it made me think about it in the question of the pandemic, where we see our individual actions being really important and contributing to this, symbiotic relationship that we have with each other. And you see globally too, we see how this pandemic is really doing something that teaches us that whatever happens, on a different continent has consequences for us here, even if here we choose to believe that we are in a better place or safer. So I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on your interest in symbiosis, and also how it's reflected in the way you make your work and the way you present them.
So, okay, one thing, and okay, when we talk about symbiosis, I'll eventually want to get to the liking, because I think that's a really good way to explain how, we're here. Okay, one thing that I really like about the idea of symbiosis, or one of the many things I like about the idea of symbiosis, is that it does take away this idea of an individual, which feels very, that individual capitalist, like each person for their own way of thinking, which is obviously very problematic. And so it's like, what could, how is it that we could see ourselves in symbiosis? Because we already have that going on within our bodies, in our guts, in our, in our interactions with each other, on microscopic levels that we can't understand. Or if we can't understand, it's still kind of like hard to grasp just because of the scale of it. What can we learn from nature when it does actually do this thing? And how it can cultivate really harmonious scenarios, like not always, because sometimes it can be like in parasitical kind of like circumstances, it can be a little bit more tricky. But yeah, like how can we learn by watching and listening? And so I started to talk to a lichenologist as I was working. Should I move on to the glass sculptures, or should we?
Yeah, no, go ahead. Oh, here we are. They're right here in front of us.
We can always go back to the alabaster pieces.
Yes, of course. There's more images of all of them. So.
Yeah. So the glass work, they're called, there's 4 in the show. They're called Canary 1, 2, 3, 4. I think they're just numbered. And they kind of, the word canary references canary in the coal mine, because lichen in old growth forests kind of is the first of the plant life that tends to, or life that tends to dwindle, or the numbers go down when something is wrong. So they're a good first indicator for a balance being off in an old growth forest. And so I reached out to a lichenologist who was very kind and gave me a lot of information about, because this also isn't really known, of which species are going extinct. And for those of you who don't know, lichen is made up of a symbiotic relationship between fungi and algae. They don't exist apart from each other in the form of lichen. It is completely a symbiotic relationship. So they're not a one, they're a many. So yeah, he gave me information about the species of lichen that were becoming endangered, and then gave me a whole bunch of images, because he also photographs them all under microscopes. I then, in wax, and this one particular one we're looking at, Canary 3, is done in wax. There's 2 in wax and there's 2 in clay, to try and replicate these forms, but obviously on a completely enlarged scale, and replicate in a abstract way, like I'm not trying to make it look exactly like the pieces, they're just sort of representations of. And I wanted to cast them in glass because they are disappearing, you know what I mean? So they are, they're not this full, opaque piece. They are dwindling, they are fading, but they're still casting shadows, like they're still there, they're still holding their own. And what they're doing, the shapes tend to be a little on the side of, they look a little bit like eyes and they look a little bit like mouths. Like they're watching these sculptures, these alabaster sculptures in the center. They're observing them, and they are, maybe they're trying to warn them. You know what I mean? Like this happened to us. You know, like you need to. Maybe there's another way you can protect yourself from, because lichen specifically responds poorly to like air pollution. You know, maybe there's something else that I don't know. So they're kind of like, they're watchful. They feel wise to me, and then they're maybe warning these pieces, or not, or maybe they're just trying to communicate with them, but they are kind of like fading into the background. And there's tons of fingerprints in these pieces. So there's very much the human hand or my hand in it. If you were to go up close, it was kind of hard to capture in photos. This piece was made with wax as well, and this is like, I think these are kind of more of like, feel like lips to me. And they were made by pouring wax onto the floor. So yeah, the wax was poured, or wax is made from the clay, and then that is then cast in glass. And then they're separated from the wall a little bit, so they're kind of like reaching out a little bit.
It's really great to hear you talk about the materiality and kind of your work with materials, and how you arrived at this particular surface that is so tactile, and also it has this kind of translucent quality to it. They're really beautiful, and as you said, like there are like those warning signals, you know, around. They were presented that way in the exhibition. But when you talk about materials, I want to bring out the fact that you were trained as a photographer. So you've come a long way from that. So I'm just wondering, what has your journey been like through time? I've seen it happen. I've seen it in your exhibition trajectory, but how have you arrived at this particular moment in your practice, so rooted in kind of three-dimensionality and sculpture, and but you started with photography? Can you talk about that?
I know it's weird, right?
I think it makes sense, but
I think it's actually common. There's a few other artists I've heard like say this, but so yeah, I did photography, and I graduated like quite a while ago, 2006, which feels that's been some time. But in that time period, I've like, okay, basically I became really curious. Okay, I became frustrated with what photography couldn't do. There was I felt a lot of limitations to it. Doesn't mean that I would never use it again. I think that it can be used really well. But I wanted to see what would happen with like making something three-dimensional. So at first it became like, it was a curiosity. And I think that curiosity kind of has come to me even thus far. Like carving stone, for example, like I was like, let me just literally just try it. And then from there, you know, watch a YouTube video, ask somebody for their advice who knows how to do it. You know, also just trial and error. And then I think that maybe not necessarily knowing how to use things properly made me see made me curious about what the material could do. And I've used lots of them, you know, like silicone, resins, metal, glass, stone, plaster, graphite. Like I've gone all over the place. So I think that curiosity for me keeps me like, it gives me energy to sort of be focused on what else I can get out of the work, and like see, like, okay, for instance, like when it came to trying to make these pieces of stone fit together, that challenge was just like, okay, that's something I want to focus on. If I can do that, I want to know how that's going to feel. Like that's an example. And then, you know, another thing with stone particularly, if we can just focus on that for a second, is like it's hard to do, but it's hard to do, but the longer you work on it, if you have patience and you just keep continuing and focusing and just keep going, even though it can physically hurt a lot, what you can get out of it is just unbelievable. And I think that, you know, like the sanding process at the very end is the most difficult part to do. In terms of it is very repetitive and you have to go through many stages, but each stage you go through, you're bringing out like the detail of like this black alabaster, for example, that we're seeing, and you just keep going. Like you want to take it all the way to polish, and you want to bring out the beauty of it. So, you know, whatever work I put into it, it put already so much. And so
it's interesting that you're mentioning pain and kind of your own body in this process, because when I saw the sculptures, they looked like they were posed to have this almost like presence of body parts, or like to act as bodies, right? And there was something very organic and corporeal about them. So even I remember the way they were described in the artist statement, you know, the fact that they cuddle and they kind of, you know, they lean on each other. There's this kind of almost anthropomorphic quality to them. So can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah. Well, what I like about that too is it's like it kind of like how we were talking about sort of trying to break down this idea of individual, and then I go anthropomorphizing everything. So I because it's hard to not, you know what I mean? Like also I like that the pieces can feel organ-like they can feel like they are sort of like part of your body or a limb or something like that. Like they aren't yeah, I mean, like, I don't know exactly what my liver might look like, but it might look a little bit like that, you know, like that kind of thing. I think it's a nice way to draw us in to part of the conversation. And, you know, this rock wants to be sensual in some ways. Like it's hard to describe how it just sort of like, I think it pulled me in that direction and I went with it. Which like I followed an intuitive feeling that was happening while I was making it, which is not something that I would have normally done in the past. And that felt really good. And I think that the trusting the instincts, then I think like when I looked on them again, I was like, okay, well, am getting out of this what I want to. Like they do sort of like feel like they're a part of us in a way. And some of the gestures are like, you know, the triple spoon or like a nestling or, you know, they are actions of, you know, human behavior or animal behavior or just behavior. So
but there's a tenderness to them, right? Which kind of you think of stone and you so it's the quality of that surface is really beautifully realized in this context. And before we move on to the next body of work, which you also presented here in Toronto, I want to address the science fiction, right, and something speculative future. So this idea of inspiration coming to you from that side of the kind of literary spectrum. So you mentioned 2321, so the book, and but science fiction plays an important role in your practice. So can you talk about that? And also we can start talking about From Root to Lip, which is another example of it's like symbiotic presentation of sculptural forms that are also like anthropomorphic and very different from one.
So I was reading a lot of science fiction, and then it just started to become something that I always started to primarily read it, and then I started to come into authors that were really captivating, not only in the sense of like forward thinking or future thinking in terms of what technology can do, but a very sociological understanding of people and behavior, and not just people, not just human behavior, all behavior. And I started to sort of see this as something that I thought would be so you're reading it and you're trying to imagine it, in which case like you can kind of go like you can go in many directions. you're given some opportunity and within that speculation along with them. And sometimes they problem solve, and sometimes you are with a character who's going through something that you might not be able to understand, but you can follow their path. And I felt like I was learning from it, and I felt like it was a very rich experience to follow these characters. And so, yeah, the previous show for Swan is based off of a specific character who I felt like would have liked the show. like someone who would have been,
your ideal audience.
yeah, like they would have understood it, because they obviously were they made ecosystems on asteroids, clearly, and they were a land artist, so they would have loved it, like so so that one very much became for Swan particularly. This was previous to that, so this isn't dedicated to a specific character. But I like that they, like, basically in these science fiction novels, anything's sort of possible. And then when you're reading really good science fiction authors, which there are a lot of, I particularly like Ursula Le Guin and Octavia Butler and N.K. Jemisin. I like Kim Stanley Robinson quite a bit, really excellent world builder. I just felt like I was working through something that I wanted to work through physically, and I wanted to work through with the work itself. Like, it was starting to influence the way sculptures form themselves, and sculptures became characters, if that makes any sense in some way. So, yeah, do you want me to talk about the show?
Yeah, I mean, those are very different in feel, right? Because they almost look like some kind of futuristic garden.
Mm-hmm.
Those tentacular forms reaching towards each other, and kind of,
yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. Well, yeah, I mean, they're doing their thing. So the show's called From Root to Lip, as in like the root to lip, as in like it's up to language. And so these are again, like, microscopic. There's pollen and seeds, dandelion seeds, spores, yeast clusters, human cells or red blood cells, and then archaeobacteria. And so they're blown up and interpreted in alabaster and glass. And so the way that these things would communicate with each other in nature wouldn't necessarily have language. Like the language that we understand it, it would be like a chemical language. And so I was giving them a different way of communicating in this little, like, kind of science fiction dance scenario garden, of like reaching towards each other. They had gesture, so they were reaching and give, like, acts of giving and taking. Sometimes it seemed like they were more aggressive or they were more passive, is something natural that started to show itself as they actually became made. The bronze part, so that actually you can see that bronze part of that piece that's going into the armature of the steel armature references plant grafting. Some of the earliest human technology on with nature, for better agricultural yields and for beauty of plant life. So that kind of came into the fold as well. And one thing to note is that these armatures actually go all the way into the floor, not into the floor, sorry, but they twist around. So they actually do have like a root that's hidden in the presentation on this like stage like plinth. Yeah, these are the two archaea on the left. So archaea is like a bacteria that tends to live in really extreme environments, like very acidic, very hot, very salty. The yeast is on the right. It's hard to see, but the yeast does tend to look like it's coming towards the fungi spore. If you go on, there's like that's the 5-fingered blood cell that's kind of like looking out to the viewer for us to kind of participate in this installation. They're also quite large. So they're
Yeah, I think that if I go back, sorry, to you can
Yeah.
see the figure.
Yeah, so that's the
yeah.
dandelion seed is on the left, and then the that's grass pollen. Sorry, the dandelion seed is on the right, the grass pollen is on the left, and these two are kind of coming towards each other. And I liked this relationship when it was exhibited at the SAG didn't happen, but I like these two because the grass pollen, like our relationship with like grass, like lawns, is very bizarre. And the idea of like having this weedless lawn is I think very odd human behavior. And so the dandelion seed, which is considered a weed, but which is actually like one of the most resilient plants. It's it's food, it's healing.
Yeah.
Like those two are having like a moment. Maybe they're figuring something out with each other. And so, yeah, like, are they on their way to being completely entangled? Like, I guess that's a question. So you can see how this bit went to the next one.
And I think this idea of questioning the entanglement or the how different species cohabit, it's very relevant and almost urgent, and also you talk about how those are microscopic organisms. And I think with the pandemic, we've seen so many pictures of what this virus looks like and how it mutates. And I think that we're all much more versed in what microscopic imagery reveals about the entanglement, right? And how, of course, how the virus generated with another species and crossed into ours. And so I think that there's this, I think in a way, your investigations are so apropos of everything that's happening or what we're going through today. And I'm sure that when you were inspired to create them, you had no idea that we will all be talking about this kind of interspecies entanglement to this effect.
Yeah. So this might be, should we move on to these video images at this point? Okay.
Yes,
so
I'm headed there slowly. There we go. Bringing in the body in a more present way, the human body. So this is a video, Vessels for Coalescence, that she made in 2018. And it was actually presented with From Root to Leaf, right, in an exhibition in the Southern Alberta Art Gallery. And it's a looping 10-minute long video. We will play an excerpt at the end, but let's talk a little bit about it because it's really fascinating for me. It was interesting to learn about it, and maybe you can tell us about it. Yeah.
It was this. So this is the first time that I did some kind of like speculative writing. So I wrote a script, and it's sort of about. It's abstract, but it's three women speaking to each other, working out their scenario. Like you don't necessarily know where they are, when they are. Some events that happened way in the past to sort of refer to in the future, and vice versa. Things that haven't happened, that have been speculated as to happen or potentially could happen, is spoken of in the past. And they are working through, supporting each other. They're working through what they need to do to survive. They're working together to, talk about memory and talk about language. And like, it's very playful. The script itself is very playful. And so I wrote the script, and then I had three like-minded people read it, and they read over what they were reading before they were forced to say anything. So they, and I kind of like wrote each one as like, I remember them saying that once, like this actual person, but that was more for me, but that was in there as well. And then so they're speaking this script into these vessels. Which started to accumulate their fluid from from their lungs, basically. So as they were speaking, the words started to become droplets of moisture that collected. I hope everyone's okay with looking at this stuff right now. And so slowly over time, over multiple takes, they started to get this liquid that was, the words became tangible within that. And then this is actually, I looked at with a microscope into the vessels to capture images of the fluid. So yeah, so the words themselves are physical. All you really see is through you see the vessel itself. You don't really see the person that's speaking it. You might see them kind of abstractly, an arm, a hand, or their mouths. And then the sounds that are going over top of it are all made through the vessel as well. And then when I exhibited alongside the vessels alongside it. And I hope this doesn't gross people out too much, but what I did was, you can see they have like a plug at the top. So after we finished filming, I sealed it, shipped it to Alberta, to Lethbridge. And when the pieces got there, it was in the winter, or it was very cold. So I didn't notice anything. Like I just noticed like a marking of what I just thought it was going to show, like, when like water dries or like liquid dries. But it defrosted and there was actually liquid at the bottom in the exhibition. So yeah, like I don't think I would have made this now.
Well, I think in a way it's kind of a visual reminder of why we cannot be together, because this is how our bodies, how language functions, right? How our bodies, the role they play in producing language, and that the droplets, the famous droplets that are preventing us from being close to each other.
In this work, they're celebrated. Like it was like, and also like their mouths were really over it, like it took a lot to kind of like collect all of that. I'm not I don't really know how, anyway. Yeah, I hope this doesn't make people feel uncomfortable, but yeah, like it was supposed to feel like, like this is they're connecting, they're breathing, they're, this, and all of this is collecting within this vessel. And like, to me, that felt intimate in a way, and like kind of special. And actually I was going to take it to to have like a better microscope looking at their, like, whatever was collecting in it. And I decided that actually felt wrong. Like I didn't want to see too far. Like I wanted some privacy for the people that were generous enough to do the reading or the acting. Yeah, I was like, okay, I'll use like my microscope, which isn't as strong, and like I'll get the imagery that way.
Yeah, and we will shortly play an excerpt from the video. But before we do that, I wanted you to maybe describe the experience of presenting this in the context of the exhibition, because the language, the understanding of what is being uttered is obscured by the form of deliverance, right? So there is a broken communication in a way, and there's an echoing that happens. So that became almost a soundtrack, if I may call it that, for the experience of the exhibition.
So this was shown alongside From Root to Lip, so the last body of work we were looking at, and that piece with and without language really felt different. So in this context, like you would be like, at the SAG, you would be looking at these pieces, and you would be hearing like a very, the ups and downs of a spoken language. And in which case, I'm pretty sure that during, like even at the far back of one end, you would be able to tell that it was English being spoken, and you would even be able to pick up some of the words. So that actually made an imprint, I think, on what it is you were viewing from Root to Lip. And then when Mercer show happened, and there was really only enough exhibition space to show the one, and we wanted to just show the one, Julia, the curator, and I, and it felt very different because you couldn't hear that. So it's like then the gestures became, I felt like they were more pronounced in that, like not having the other. I don't know. I mean, they were maybe one was better than the other, maybe not. Maybe they were just different. I think they were just different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's play the excerpt, and then after that we will look and see what questions are coming from the audience. So Danny, please play the video.
I suppose we're more our digestion, more than we claim.
The gut microbe?
Yes, without them we deflate.
I squander eons trying to communicate with them. What can I read to alter our scales to be closer?
Which elixir do you need to thrive?
Without bacteria and fungi, detritus would hallow. With nothing can moisture molder? Aspire to become less like a droplet. Focus on being absorbed into a body of water.
We need to be less like a grain of sand to completely melt into terra.
Tie a knot and add another rung to the net. Please, don't be upset.
I'm not a scientist.
How should the individual be scattered to meld and think together?
There isn't a right way.
And if we choose the wrong way? Recall multiplicity.
Let's invite open-ended conversation.
Remember to throw flour on an oil fire.
Tear up the paper and start again.
Make sure to keep notes to consult tomorrow.
The essence we have infused in our vapor has made it easier to breathe.
Eucalyptus on a congested chest. A likeness to lichen would like this. Fluttering ophali with encouragement. A species left to make what they make.
Another organism left to breathe what they breathe.
A space for the beginning of new kinds.
So many possibilities floating in the atmosphere.
Sympathetic nodes are eager to propagate.
Thank you for that. That was great. So there is a question, actually quite a beautiful question. So I'm going to read it because it's a bit long. So first of all, there's a thank you. It comes from David Clark and says, thank you, Adelina and Jennifer, for such a richly generative conversation. Jennifer, could I ask you please about what I sense is the kind of productive tension in your work? On the one hand, your sculptures are referential, referring to life forms that you identify. On the other hand, these pieces feel to me to be untethered from life worlds in that they also exist as volumes, shapes, surfaces, materials, textures, and colors. Conspicuously not life, but as make things that make their making and what they are made of a big part of what they are. Perdurable stone and impermeable glass, not precarious life, not organic. But is that a tension that you think is important to your beautiful work? Do you experience your work as striving to pull away from the referential to the non-referential, or perhaps the other way around?
Okay, both. So great question. Hi, David. I think both. Okay, so another thing too, but I was talking about the forms are those things-ish. I definitely like to let, okay, I'm already being speculative. Why not like kind of let it go a few times over? Sorry. Yeah, so I wanted I want the pieces to feel like they're kind of like they're those things, but maybe not. Maybe they're also this. You know what I mean? Like they're more than one thing at a time. Like if you like for Swan, there was that piece that was very tongue-like. The dandelion seed, also in From Root to Lip, is also very tongue-like. There are many things in my head at once. Because they are kind of like becoming kind of characters in a way. So I don't want them to look exactly like the things they're referencing, because that can be found as, we have documentation of that. We don't necessarily need to, I think that, pushing what they, for them to be more than one thing is also important for the concept. Yeah, they're already doing symbiosis, but maybe they're doing other kinds of symbiosis that we don't know they're doing, and that is an abstraction.
And speaking of abstraction, what's happening in the studio right now? Maybe it's more concrete than abstract, but what are you working on, and how is that going to manifest itself?
So the studio right now is work that is going to be shown at the MoCA in 2020 this fall.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually using totally different types of stone. So, and which is like a very different experience, in which case, like being able to control it is different. You know, alabaster definitely, it is different from one type of alabaster to the other, for sure. They even smell different. They smell really good. These are Canadian stones. So they are limestone, marble, and I have a little bit of granite, and I have some amethyst. And they're very different and really hard to use. And it's fantastic because they are kind of like, I know they also have like, you know, they have a little bit of like life that had grown on them. I actually got them from a place like it's more like they're usually used for landscaping, but I'm carving them. So they're definitely harder. I've had to get like different kinds of chisels, you know, there's only so far I'll be able to go with them. So I feel like I've, with the alabaster pieces in the symbiosis, that was me having a lot of control, ish, you know what I mean? Like stone will do what it's going to do, but these stones are definitely like have their own personalities for sure. So that's what I'm working on in the studio now, is like stone problem solving, which is great. I love it.
It sounds amazing, and I think that I think the show opens in the fall, right?
Yes.
At MoCA, so it's something to look forward to. And the other thing I personally look forward to is to install the sculptures for Swan, and to try to imagine with you a different way of displaying them, and that's kind of an exciting thing to think about it for the future, for a better future. And there's one more of it's a question, but it's also I guess it's a comment, and it says, "Have you seen The Expanse? Some of your pieces, The Expanse. I guess it's a show. Some of your pieces,
it's a show, right?
Yeah. Some of your pieces make me think of the proto-molecule, who is the life form / antagonist in the first few seasons." So there's a.
Have you seen The Expanse? Some of your pieces make me think of the proto-molecule, who is the life. Oh, good. I guess I have to watch it.
There, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So no, I have not seen The Expanse.
We all have a little bit of homework to do. So, well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Jennifer, for your generosity in sharing your work with us. And we all look forward to seeing what's going to come out of the studio later this fall with the show at MoCA. And yeah, this is it for us today. Hopefully the rain will go away and we can all enjoy a little bit of fresh air. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Adelina. Thank you, everyone at the AGO, and for watching.
Bye.
Bye.